Ka tira ki ora rā tātou. Tua ki au ki te whakamārama hiahana whakaneke o nai nei. Ke ahau te karakia me te whakatau, muri atu i ahau, ka tukuna atu te rākau kōrero ki na kai whakahaere o tēnei hui. Just to explain, we're in a cathedral, so I think it's right that we begin with a karakia. And then after that, I'll do the formal welcome, and then we'll hand over to the facilitators of today's event. So without further ado, kia nui tātou. He runga te ingoa te atua, te matua, te tama me te wairua tapu, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. E te atua te kai hoko, e te atua te kai hanga, te kai tohu tohu. Creator Lord, God, e te atua e te tama, te kai hoko, te ariki. Lord Jesus Christ, Saviour and Lord. E te atua te wairua tapu, te kai arahi, te kai whakamāria. God, the Holy Spirit, guider and comforter. Anei mātou rai no atu ki a koe, hei tuku i a mātou whakamoimiti whakawhetai, e te atua. Mo au manaakitanga uwhia mai ki runga ki a tātou. We gather in this sacred space, Lord, and first of all we acknowledge your many gifts that you have given to us this day and throughout our lives. Tau mai rau o manaakitanga ki runga ki tēnei hui huinga o mātou anei ko te kaupapa, ko te whenua o Aotearoa. And we ask that you bless this gathering as we gather to discuss the issue of whenua, of land, on the day following the Treaty of Waitangi. And we ask that you bless and guide our discussions this day. I noi mātou kia koe, e te atua i runga i nā kupu a tō tama. E tō mātou matu i te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tai mai tau rangatiratanga. Kia me tia tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Ho mai kia mātou aia nei he taro ma mātou mo tēnei rā. Murua o mātou hara. Me mātou hoki e muru nei i o te hunga e hara ana ki mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangia mātou i te kino. Nau hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te kororia. Āke, āke, āke. Āmene, anei tō tātou himene, he honore, he gloria, mau ngā rongo ki te whenua, whakaro, paie, ki ngā tangata katoa. Kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai a tō tātou ariki ai hukaraiti. Me te roho o te atua. Me te whiwhinga taitanga ki te wairua tapu. Āke, āke, āke. Āmene. Kia ora tātou e noho. Ati hei mauri ora ki te whai au ki te ao marama ki a tātou rei. Te hunga ora nā mahu e tanga a kui mā a koroma. Tēnei te tuatu ki te tukumihi rā ki a tātou katoa i tai mai nei ki tēnei hui huinga, i tai mai nei kairoto ki tēnei whare tapu anei ko te tokotoru tapu. Tokotoru tapu, ka tika rā me mihi au ki te hāhi o tēnei whare, ko te hāhi mihi ngare, anei te mihi, anei te mihi, anei te mihi. Ka tika rā me mihi au ki te hāhi mihi ngare, mihi au ki nā whakapono kato kai wainganui i a mātou, anei nā katorika, anei nā wētiri ana, And I think we've got a few straight Presbyterians in the house as well. Anei te mihi, anei te mihi, anei te mihi. Ki te hunga whakapono, ki ngā waka wairua hurino I te motu. Ka tika me mihi au ki te whenua, me mihi au ki te whenua, me mihi au ki te iwi o tēnei whenua, kia Ngāti Whātua. Anei te mihi kia koutou rau. Kia koutou rai e nā uri a api hai a Ngāti Whātua. Tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi. Tēnei te mihi rā ki ngā iwi katoa huri no I te motu mai, te wai paunamu, kai tahu, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou e te iwi, hei manaaki mai I a hau I ngā tau ki muri. Mai te wai paunamu, ki te tauihu o te waka, anei te mihi o ngā iwi e whitu o te tauihu o te waka. Whakawhiti atu rai te moana o Raukawa, te Atiawa, o te whanganui ātara, Ngāti Toa, me he tahi atu rā o nā iwi, anei te mihi, anei te mihi, anei te mihi. Huri noa te motu, ki te kāhui maunga, taranaki, e tū mai e te maunga titoria. Me nā hapū nā iwi kairaro I te maunga tapu a taranaki. Whakawhiti atu rā ki te ara taha o te kā Māui, ki te tai rāwhiti, kahunungu, Ngāti Parau, aitanga māhaki, rongo whakaata, me tahi atu, ngai tā manuhiri, anei te mihi, anei te mihi, anei te mihi. Huri haere rai te motu ki te whānau apanui, ko mātātua waka tēnā, tēnā koutou rai nā uri o mātātua tūhoi, anei a tūhoi, Ngāti Awa, o ara a tūhoi, Ngāti Awa, te whakatōhia whānau apanui, e tahi atu rā, Ngāti Whare, anei te mihi, anei te mihi, anei te mihi. Tai noa ki te waiariki, ko te arawa, te waka, ko tamata kapua te tangata, ko ngā troirangi, te tōhunga, anei te mihi ki a koutou rai nā uri o te arawa waka. Huri haere rā te motu, ka tai au ki taupiri maunga, Waikato awa, he piko, he taniwha, he piko, he taniwha, ko pōta tau te whero te tangata, anei te mihi rā ki a koutou rā e nā iwi o tainui waka, Waikato, Mania poto, anei koutou, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Haua, tēnei te mihi, ka tika me mihi au ki a koutou, me mihi au ki te whare ariki a pōta tau te whero, ki tō tātou kuini Māori, te ariki nui, ngā wai hono I te pō, rire, hau, pai mā rire. Tai au ki tāmiki makaurau, ara Ngāti Whātua, anei te tīmatanga o te tai tokerau, tēnā koutou rai e nā iwi katoa o te tai tokerau Whātua, te rāroa, te uri o hau, ngā puhi whānui tonu, te whare tapua ngā puhi, te au pauri, anei te mihi, anei te mihi, anei te mihi. Tēnei te mihi rā ki ngā iwi Māori, ko ngā iwi Māori kai konei e ngā tangata tiriti, tēnā koutou rai e ngā uri, e ngā tangata o te tiriti o Waitangi, tai noa ki te moana nui a Kiwa. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi. Welcome to you all on behalf of Common Grace, and they'll be up soon, because they're going to sing my waiata. I haven't told them that, but they're going to sing my waiata. So on behalf of Common Grace and the other organisers and our presenters who are all in the front row, thank you for taking time out of your Saturday. And it's the day after Waitangi, so we're still in that theme of Waitangi. And thank you for not heckling me while I was doing my karakia this morning. But it's wonderful to have you all here. It's a brilliant kaupapa, so thank you to the people who dreamt this up and made it a reality. But most of all, thank you for coming and being a part. And those of you online, kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So have you guys got my waiata? Okay, I got your waiata. It's a well-known waiata, and we were singing it this morning. It was composed by Morven T. Simon from Te Āti Haunui a Paparangi. You might remember back in the day, Pākai, Tore, all of that, and they met at Kaiwhaiki, government MPs, Te Āti Haunui a Paparangi, local MPs, and it was all on. And in the middle of that, Morven T. Simon composed this waiata, and he said, how are we going to get through this? aroha. Whakapono. Rangi Māori e, tātou, tātou e. So anei taku waiata. Te aroha, te whakapono, me te aki Māori e, tātou, tātou e. Ano, te piti hono tātai, hono te hunga mate ki te hunga mate, te hunga ora ki te hunga ora, anei o mātou te ara, nā mahu e tanga a kuima, a korema, hurinoa, hurinoa, tēnā koutou, kātira, kia ora rā tātou katoa. Please eat it.
Tēnā koutou anō, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, to extend our greeting and acknowledgements and gratitude for all of us being here today. Ko Andrew toku ingoa. My name is Andrew Clark-Howard. I am very privileged to be part of this kaupapa connected through Common Grace. You'll hear a little bit from me in a bit, so I'm going to hand over to my fellow organisers who will introduce themselves, share a little bit about how this gathering came about, and then we'll get stuck into some of the wonderful stories we have the honour of listening to today. Tēnā koutou.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Alex Johnston toku ingoa. My name is Alex. I'm one of the co-directors of Common Grace Aotearoa, and just want to tautoko the deep gratitude and for you all for being here, for our esteemed speakers for bringing their time and energy and their wisdom to share today, to the Cathedral for hosting this space. We're deeply grateful, and to Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, on whose whenua we stand. And so just to briefly share a bit about Common Grace Aotearoa. This is a collaborative event between Common Grace and Tauiwi mō Matiki Mai, and we'll hear a bit more about Tauiwi mō Matiki Mai shortly. But Common Grace is a faith-based organisation started up a few years ago that is seeking to equip and organise Christians across Aotearoa to transform unjust structures for the common good. So we work with all of ngā hāhi o Aotearoa to organise around the issues of climate justice, economic justice and te tiriti justice. So this is one of our key pau, to focus in the space of te tiriti o Waitangi, particularly how we can build and equip our faith movements to be part of the ongoing reconciliation journey heading towards the vision of constitutional transformation as envisioned in Matiki Mai Aotearoa. So as part of that, this conversation around land return came up in conversation with our friends at Matiki Mai, Tauiwi mō Matiki Mai, around how can we find and socialise some of these examples, many of which happen to be in faith spaces and churches that have engaged in returning land to tangata whenua. And so that was an early conversation that then sparked and evolved into this event today. So I'll hand over to Jess to share a bit more about that.
Kia ora tātou. And here we are. And who am I? Who is here with all of us? I belong to British and particularly Kōrero or Welsh lands. On these lands I am Tauiwi Pākehā and part of collectives of Tauiwi mō Matiki Mai Aotearoa, this project for constitutional transformation, a constitution to be based on he whakaputanga and te tiriti o Waitangi. I belong to my loved ones, I belong to spiritual traditions of Quakers and Druids, I belong to collectives of those who neuroqueer, and my new shiny name is Jessie Shan. Kia ora. I was invited by one of those dear loved ones and a fellow tauiwi mō Matiki Mai called Mikesh Patel to join this kaupapa. I'm so grateful to Mikesh, who's joining us on the live stream. Kia ora e hoa, from India. And Mikesh and I connected, I think, coming up 10 years ago at actually a gathering organised by Heather came, who's in the audience. Kia ora Heather and Dennis. And we connected over this shared love for the stream in this project of an honourable constitution by the year 2040. And then a little while later, we had the privilege of going and meeting Matua Moana Jackson, who convened the project and wrote this incredible report. And Mikesh and I were fired up, and a lot of our friends were there as well. And we were revolutionary, ready to burn stuff down. We're like, Matua, what do we do? What do we do? And he was like, just keep having the conversations. Just keep talking to people. And this is part of that. And it's so lovely. I'm looking at the back of this report, and it's got this beautiful image of rangatahi with Moana Jackson and Whaia Margaret Mutu at Waitangi. And it feels really precious to have them here in the room in this way. It talks about a values-based constitution, a constitution based on shared values. And the number one value, tikanga. That being the value from which all other values arise on this whenua. And I see the land back project, because land doesn't move, right? We don't parcel it up and give it back. The land stays the same. But what we're doing when we're giving land back is transforming how we are collectively constituted with that land. And we're bringing it back into alignment with tikanga. And that is constitutional transformation. I'd like to acknowledge the collectives who have supported this event with grants. The Joan MacDonald Trust, Common Grace, Tangata Tiriti, Te Hāhi Tū Hauwiri, the Quakers of Aotearoa. And I'd also like to warmly thank the volunteers from Tauiwi Tautoko for coming and supporting this today, and Marisa and Ingrid for coming and making copies of Matiki Mai available. Amazing. Wonderful to have you all here. Kia ora.
For those of us who are gathered here in person, we are gathered in a space called the Bishop Selwyn Chapel, named after George Augustus Selwyn, the first Anglican Bishop of New Zealand and a prominent figure in the history of this city and the settlement of Aotearoa. I thought it was apt to open our afternoon, or continue opening rather, with Bishop Selwyn. First, because in quite a vivid sense, we're gathered in his whare, but also because his legacy highlights much of the pain, but also the promise, perhaps, of the kaupapa for which we are gathered. For as we will hear from some of the kōrero to follow, I'm sure Bishop Selwyn's legacy, as with the legacy of the church, is contested, complicated to say the least. On the one hand, Bishop Selwyn was at times a dogged advocate for Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the protection of Māori land, often putting him at odds with the emerging British colony which he had been appointed bishop. In his own words, Selwyn defended the treaty for its firm protection of tangata whenua, specifically, quote, that no land would be taken from Māori when they are not willing to sell. When pressure upon the colonial office by the New Zealand Company led to legislation which directly undermined Article 2 of the treaty, Selwyn protested loudly, writing in a letter to a friend, "I would rather the colonial secretary cut me in pieces than induced me by any personal compliments to resign the New Zealanders, that is, te iwi Māori, to the tender mercies of men, that is, the British colonists, who avow to take the land of the New Zealanders and would not scruple to use force for that purpose." Though, as is so often the case, Bishop Selwyn's protests were largely an individual ripple in the overwhelming waves of colonisation, based on these remarks alone and gathering in this space, we might think this is a promising place to begin our kōrero on the return of unjustly acquired land in Aotearoa and restoring tino rangatiratanga over ngā whenua Māori. Yet, Bishop Selwyn's extremely painful support for British military action in the invasion of the Waikato, serving as chaplain to the imperial forces, reveals much about where his allegiances ultimately lay, as does it about the systematic nature of the theft and violence of colonisation in these lands. And there are people in this room and from our speakers who will be much better positioned to speak about some of that. But I wanted to raise this before getting into some of our stories to acknowledge that the legacy of Bishop Selwyn and the legacy of Christianity from which many of our kai kōrero belong, myself included, will invoke different feelings for us in this room. For some, it may be a complicated mix of belonging or distance. For others, it may be a visceral reminder of colonial trauma. And it was important to acknowledge this before diving deeper into our kaupapa today, and to acknowledge the trust that you are putting in us for being here, and the trust that we are putting in each other to share this complicated space together, for those of different faiths and also for those of none. All are welcome in this space, but we must acknowledge it is not a neutral one. Before handing over to our first speaker, I wanted to also mihi to Erin Thomas, who is joining us, I hope, online, who was originally invited to facilitate this discussion and has graciously helped prepare our time together before falling unwell in the last week and being unable to make it. But in her reflections on opening this event, she wrote, "We're gathering in the context of the veil of violent imperialism being lifted around the world. From Palestine to Congo to our neighbours in West Papua and Kanaki, the horror of colonialism continues. Here in Aotearoa, colonialism rests heavily on land. Stealing land trampled on the relationship of the people which the whenua itself calls for, one of reciprocity and deep spiritual connection. Colonialism replaced this relationship, as it does with all institutions with transactional ownership, devoid of relations. Though some feeble justice has been achieved through the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal, which can make recommendations about Crown land, the Tribunal is yet unable to comment on privately owned land. And this is why we gathered this discussion to focus on land-back stories that are local. They represent different attempts by non-Crown communities to honour tino rangatiratanga and constitutional transformation at that local level. Each of our speakers holds wisdom about what honourable relationships would look like with the whenua and with each other in light of these colonial pasts. There will be time, I hope, for us to discuss, to ask questions, and even workshop, as we'll have breakout sessions later, some of the discussions we have today. But what will be clear throughout this afternoon, as is so often the case, is that relationships are pivotal. And that is really the core focus of why we are here. A little bit of housekeeping then before handing over to our first speakers. This afternoon's discussion, we're privileged to hear from 5 different stories of land back, from churches, from local communities, from private individuals. I'll introduce each of our speakers to come and share their stories for around 15 minutes, but we'll give it as much time as it needs. We'll hear from 3 of our speakers and then have a little break, probably around 2:30. Just for a quick glass of water, a toilet stop, a stretch outside, before coming in to hear from our final 2, and then having hopefully a good chunky time for Q&A. When it comes to Q&A, am I doing slides here? Oh, there we go. We will be using, brilliant. Using this platform, Menti, to do it. So as you are listening to the different kōrero, please note down your questions, log on to this, we'll put it in the screen later on, and we'll use it as a way to gather some of our different thoughts. And then after Q&A, we'll break for some kai at around 4, heading over into a different space to have afternoon tea together before our breakout workshops, which I will mention a little bit later. But to flag up front, it's going to be a hefty afternoon. It is warm in this whare, and so please do take care of yourself. The length of time is only part of what will make this a big day. As we've already discussed, returning Indigenous land necessarily involves discussion of the theft and removal of this land from tangata whenua. If you need to step outside for any reason, if you need to take a break, recenter yourself, please do so, and make space of the gardens outside here or other spaces in the cathedral which have been graciously opened up to us today. Final quick housekeeping. Bathrooms, should you need them at any time, are on the left door, straight down, and then on the first break, you'll see them on the left sign out there. If there's an emergency, we all gather onto the car park out there. If we're on the other side, we gather onto the big square outside the cathedral. I think that has all the housekeeping I need. Yeah, sure, that'd be good, yeah.
Sorry, so just to explain how this platform works. So it's an online, if you type in that link, or if you can access it with the QR code, that's a place you can pop your question as it's in your head. It's because it's a longer session, pop it in straight away, and rather than trying to remember it for the end. And then other people can thumbs up the question as you put it in, so that we'll get a sense of questions that people want to have answered, because we won't have time to cover every question in the Q&A spot. So either by typing in that link, there's the Wi-Fi password if you need it, or accessing with the QR code.
Now to our wonderful kai kōrero who have gathered here. We've already had the chance this morning to get to know each other a little bit, to share lunch, but I just wanted to extend again my gratitude and profound humility that you have joined us and trusted us with your stories today. Some have gathered from across the North Island, and we're just really honoured to have you here. All of our speakers will be sharing their own impressions and experiences based on the stories that they have been involved with. They will be part of and connected to wider communities, but are speaking as individuals experiencing this kaupapa of land back. And the order of our speakers today is roughly going to follow the length of Te Ika a Maui, starting from the mouth of the fish and then working our way up north. We don't quite get towards the top of the tail, but ka kei te pai. Our first speakers this afternoon are Sister Sue Cosgrove, Sister Margaret Ann Mills, and Matua Mātai Stewart, who have travelled today, or Sister Sue and Sister Margaret Ann have travelled from Te Whanganui Tara to be with us. Sisters Sue and Margaret Ann are part of the Sisters of Compassion, a Catholic order founded by Mother Suzanne Albert. Sue and Margaret Ann will be sharing the case study of Taputiranga Marae in Island Bay in conversation with Mātai Stewart, son of the founder of the marae, the late Bruce Stewart. Please, can you join me in welcoming Sue, Margaret, and Matua Mātai.
Test. He tapu te whenua o tātou whaia te whenua, te taonga te whenua mō te mahi o tātou katoa. The land is sacred, the land is our mother, the land is a gift, the land is for the use of us all. The whenua connects us and grounds us in taputeranga, the whenua connects and grounds us in God. We do indeed stand on holy ground. Celebration is an activity rooted in gratitude for our life, for our world, for the families and friends of our history, for all that has shaped us. We give thanks for it all. We must not only give thanks, but be thanks. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for the introduction. You've given that part, so that's helpful. So just to give you some context about Mirihohepa Suzanne O'Bear. Mirihohepa Suzanne O'Bear came to Aotearoa from France in 1860, along with other Catholic missionaries at the invitation of Bishop Pompallier. She lived next door to him for 8 years in Auckland. Consequently, her missionary life was influenced by his vision, values, and relationships. And in particular, her mentor, Hoki, who was baptised Piata by Bishop Pompallier in the late 1840s, became Merihohepa's mentor, and Merihohepa learnt many things Māori from her. So Pompalia's values were Merihohepa's inspiration for her life's journey and what she held on to in all her relationships. Pompalia taught his missionaries, Merihohepa being one of 22, on board the whaling boat that brought them to Aotearoa in 1860. For example, in his instructions book, one of the instructions was, deal respectfully with cultural and spiritual difference. Secondly, respecting Māori culture is enhanced by learning te reo, and there were many more. Merihohepa kept those values throughout her life. They continued to influence many people, even today. This woman, Merihohepa, influenced Bruce Stewart by the stories he heard and read, particularly the book Never Let Go by Pat Rafter. Bruce found a connection with Merihohepa. Conversations, kōrero, began with his neighbours, the Sisters of Compassion, primarily in the utilisation of the abandoned farmland surrounding the Home of Compassion at Island Bay. Bruce knew by purchasing the land it would benefit the rangatira, the young people, and there was the potential to restore the whenua back to its original state. Bruce's remains are at Tapataranga. Not far away, Merihohepa's remains are at the crypt at the Home of Compassion Chapel. If you stand on the hillside, you can view the urupa and the chapel. There is a binding thread or rope between Bruce's vision, Tapataranga Marae, and Merihohepa's vision, the Compassion Whānau. Both stretch far beyond Island Bay, Wellington. And Sister Sue has more of the story.
Kia ora, Margaret. So it was in 1974 that Bruce Stewart began purchasing land in Rhine Street, Island Bay, just neighbouring the Home of Compassion. Bruce Stewart was a visionary, and having just spent time cooling off, as it were, he read the book, as Margaret mentioned, Never Let Go by Pat Rafter. The story introduced him to a similar brave and visionary woman, Merihohepa Suzanne O'Bear. So with $25 in his pocket, Bruce began purchasing a section in Rhine Street, Island Bay. Similarly, as it happens, Suzanne came to Wellington from Hiruharama, Jerusalem, up the Whanganui River, with 2 and 6 in her pocket, and that was in 1899. In fact, the 6th of January, the feast of the Epiphany. Back in 1988, the Sisters of the Time and Bruce began negotiations for the purchase of land that had been bought initially by Suzanne O'Bear. And from whom Suzanne got the land is not clear to us. Bruce's dream was to build a marae with scope for developing a safe place for those on the edge, and to re-establish native bush on the land known as Manakareoi, and that was too for the purposes of native bush and for restoring habitat for native birds. In 1988, negotiations began for the purchase of several acres of land from the Sisters of Compassion. This included a mortgage with the Sisters of $300,000 to be paid within 10 years. Payments from Bruce and his team were regular. Eventually, the sisters, as they looked forward to the year 2000, in what's known as the Year of Jubilee, within which is one of the invitations from the book of Leviticus about the Year of Jubilee, is to wipe any debts. $100,000 was owing, give or take. In August of 1999, a group of sisters approached Bruce with a letter.
Dear Bruce, next year the Sisters of Compassion are planning to celebrate the new millennium and the 2,000 years since the birth of Christ and his church. Pope John Paul II, when proclaiming the year 2000, a Jubilee year, described the biblical custom of Jubilee as a time dedicated in a special way to God. In the Old Testament, it reminds us that, at times prescribed by law, a Jubilee year had to be proclaimed to assist those in need. Justice according to the law of Israel consisted above all in the protection of those in want. Prompted by the message of Pope John Paul and our own reflections, the Sisters of Compassion have unanimously decided that at the beginning of the next year to forgive the debt owed to the sisters by the Tapataranga Trust. By cancelling the debt, the sisters acknowledged the tremendous work Bruce had done for the benefit of the society and the efforts are making towards the restoration of the land. Yours sincerely, Sister Josephine Gorman.
And in response, Bruce wrote back to us.
Kāra, I'm reading this, and it's my dad's handwriting, which is lovely to read, but his handwriting is absolute trash. Sister Josephine Gorman, Sisters of Compassion, House of Compassion, Island Bay, Wellington. Tēnā koutou ngā whare aroha. I often find myself savouring your visit. Early on, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Early on Monday, the 9th of August, and with a simple ceremony and then saying it is the intention of the sisters to forgive the debt owed by the Trust to the sisters in the new millennium. At first I was speechless, struck dumb by the hugeness of it. Now, thankful from all of us at the marae, it is an unbelievable event, an everyday business. Tēnā nui te aroha ki te whānau. Nā, Bruce.
Being free of debt, Bruce was able to continue fulfilling his dreams and his vision along with Tapatiranga Trust and the Trust Manawa Karioi. Today we see and thoroughly appreciate the reforestation of the hill and the safe place for birds. The overall feeling is that we are genuinely in communion. We are an evolving community. In December of 1999, 31st of December, the ceremony to mark the occasion of the debt being cancelled, a certificate was handed to Bruce in recognition of the event. And we'll conclude here with the way we started.
He tapu te whenua o tātou whaia te whenua, te taonga te whenua, te whenua mo te mahi o tātou katoa. The land is sacred, the land is our mother, the land is a gift, the land is for us, the use of us all. The whenua connects and grounds us in Tapatiranga, the whenua connects and grounds us in God. We do indeed stand on holy ground. Celebration is an activity rooted in gratitude for our life, for our world, for our families and friends, our history, for all that has shaped us. We give thanks for it all. We must not only give thanks, but be thanks. Mō reira, ka nau te mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou.
Amen.
Tēnā koutou. As I was listening, I was struck by the fact that the restoration of relationship was at the heart of that, and that was a relationship that, as you articulated it, was through generations. It was over the course of centuries to finally get to a process of this type of return. So thank you for sharing. We have a brief acknowledgement of our thanks that Jessie is bringing for you, just a koha both for being here and for sharing yourselves. And we look forward to hearing a little bit more about it in our discussion at the end. So kia ora koutou. Ooh, deep breaths. Keep us cooling down. Our second speaker this afternoon is the Reverend Dr. Arapera Ngaha. Whaia Arapera is tūmanaki of Te Taha Māori, the Māori branch of Te Hāhi Wetererana o Aotearoa, the Methodist Church of New Zealand. She will be sharing case studies of land return she has helped facilitate from within the Methodist Church. Can we please welcome Whaia Arapera? Kia ora.
Kia ora tātai, tēnara tātou katoa, koutou ku tai ki runga I te reo karanga o tēnei kaupapa. He kaupapa whakahirahira tēnei. Nā reira tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. Ko hau ko Arapera Ngaha, tumuaki o te taha Māori, o te Hāhi Wetererana. So, I'll try and keep to time, okay? I just want to begin by talking about who we are and how we get to do this business of whakahokia whenua. In 1983, the Methodist Church of New Zealand chose to pursue a bicultural, a pathway towards a bicultural church. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, it's taken a long time to work some of these things through. Part of that process is about land. And so this kōrero today, I will focus on what we formed a land commission in 1988 and looked at how best we deal with these things. So, what is the theological imperative that drives this process? And what is our response to that notion of returning land? So I've got a number of things in this slide, in this program, but I'll try and stick to the why we do this and how to do it, okay? Out of our conference of 1989 is the kōrero there, that a theology of land appropriate to the life here in Aotearoa and to a response to the Treaty of Waitangi, and we have also included into our mission our mission statement, he hakaputanga. All of it is rooted in creation. So there's a brief outline of the first few verses of Genesis, beginning the Jewish story of creation. Then we look at Te Orokohanga, the Māori story of creation. And there are 3 states, te kore, te pō, ka puta ki te ao marama. And it looks a bit like this. And many of our kai kōrero will recite this, the journey from the beginning of time through into te ao marama. The earth and the sky came into being during this time through the self-generation of Ranginui and Papatuanaku. This is kind of my pet hate. It's not really a hate, but It's something that irritates me. Ngā atua are the personification of the natural elements. Children of Rangi and Papa, and some of them I've listed here. Tāwhiri Mātea, the wind, the rain, the storms. Tāne Mahuta, Tāne of the forest. But Tāne had a number of jobs to do throughout his journey through the world. One of them being Tāne toko i te rangi. Tāne, who was the one who pushed his parents apart. So Tāne is known by a number of names pertaining to the roles he undertook at various times. And then, of course, we have Tangaroa, who has dominion of the waterways, be they fresh water, salt water, and all the life within them. Haumea, tiki tiki, and so on. You look up any dictionary and it'll tell you atua equates to the word God. I roto te ao Māori, in the Māori world, they are not necessarily gods, but they are the caretakers, the kaitiaki. They have oversight of these various stages of the world. So it's kind of a misnomer, because if you look at the English word God, that's not really what our atua are. Okay? I've skipped a whole lot of my notes, but never mind. Pāhenare Tate. He refers to atua as spiritual beings. Some might know our tohunga Rereata Mākiha, who calls them elements of nature. And so for me, I believe the translation of atua as gods or goddesses a misnomer and misleading. These are ideas taken from a monocultural context and put into a Māori context, and hence the dilemma we face sometimes. Geographical features are the embodiments of Papatūānuku with an identity of their own and bearing names of significance to the local hapū. Pepeha, and commonly one of the most well-known ones is ko Taupiri te Maunga, ko Waikato te Awa, ko Waikato te Iwi, ko Potatau te Tangata. Taupiri is the mountain, Waikato is the river, Waikato is also the people, and Potatau, the head of the kingitanga, and of course their whole Waikato whakapapa. More recently, the Crown has recognised some of these elements through legislation. For instance, Te Uruwera, the claim for Te Uruwera, recognises the forest as having a life of its own. The Te Awa Tupua, Whanganui River, that too in legislation. So here's the beginnings of a melding of tikanga, Māori thinking and being, with ways in which non-Māori can understand and identify with. Indigeneity in land. Māori are not alone in their consideration of the place of land in their worldview. Indigenous peoples throughout the world identify their beginnings as derived from the land. Many seeing the land as mother. Wati Longcha, Asian theologian, Indigenous theologian, notes that Indigenous people hold a very high nature-centred tradition and ethics of responsibility and respect for creation. The land is seen as an integral part of the web of life, physical and spiritual, but not inert, empty and passive. For Indigenous peoples, we belong to the land. We do not own the land. The notion of owning the land was a completely alien concept to tribal Māori. So the worldviews of Māori and Pākehā differ. In respect of whenua, our whenua is not seen as a commodity to be used, to be bought and traded, but it has significant value, both spiritual and material. Stories about our whenua are important for our local iwi and hapū. And so for our own Methodist people and our church history, whenua has a spiritual dimension and is a must for Methodists to understand. In our church, if anyone chooses to sell a piece of land owned by the church, perhaps a parish has a parsonage that is no longer being used as such, and they wish to sell. No one is allowed to sell the land that belongs to the Methodist Church without conducting a kōrero papatupu whenua, is what we call it, the land story. What's the history of this land? You can find the title changes over years from council, from LINZ, websites, etc. But before then, how did the land come into the hands of the church? Who lived here before the church people? And so going back and investigating that, understanding who the people were that lived in this space, and in many cases, who gifted it. So, where am I at? A couple of biblical texts that help to instill the rationale for why we do what we do. We've just come out of Waitangi. Hands up who was in Waitangi yesterday. Ah, yeah, me too. Okay, so Maika, very much. To do justice, that is what our charge is as Methodists. To do justice, to love kindness and to walk humbly with our God. So, I'm just going to talk now about how to do this stuff. We've got the why, or why we've done it. This is the how. Land has come into our control in a number of ways. Sometimes it's confiscated land. Much of the Taranaki and Waikato region is confiscated land. So the government has had a role to play in some of that. But yeah, taken forcibly from Māori. Gifted land. Sometimes our people have become enamoured by the local missionary who came to settle in their area, and they gift land to the mission for the work of the church. And then years later, decades later, when the congregations have shrunk to almost nobody, the land is still there. The building's still there. Still under the auspices, in our case, of the Methodist Church. And what do we do with it? What do we do with it? They just sit there. So, gifted land, it's an important part of what we do, is to go back and research. Research that property, find out who actually gifted it to us, why, and who might it be returned to. All part of that kōrero papatupu whenua, the land story. Sometimes there is irregularly purchased land, for example, where people were tricked into signing over land that was multiply owned, but we'll get this one, we can get him, and he'll sign it for us. And it happened. more than we care to think about. And then the last one, Crown grants. Now, my family in a little place called Otaua, where I come from, are currently occupying a piece of farmland that was given, it was leased to soldiers who returned after World War II, and there were rehab farms, and you could apply for these, and if you won the ballot, you got the land. There are a number of farms dotted all over the country who came into being like that for many families. As I say, under the hapū of Ngaitu in the north, my family are occupying the farmland and pushing for the Crown to give the land back to its original owner. Those are the ways in which, mostly, we have received land. So what do we do with it? And here's the how-to. And there are many ways to do it. This isn't the only way, but this is kind of a plan that we worked out that has worked for us over time, and we've adapted things as we've gone. Get a team together. Don't try and do it alone. It's a big job. Do the research. And for our people, we encourage them to explore the theological expression of this work. And how much do you know about this land? Not just what you can find from the titles and the transfer of land over time, maybe not even from the families who might have lived there for 2 or 3 generations, but who was there before. Get to know the Māori community in your local region. Find out what the Māori story is. Like our understandings of what land is, there are variations of understanding in how these things have come about. And I would recommend the reports of the Waitangi Tribunal. In those early reports, people poured their hearts out and told their stories, and they were recorded. So they're a valuable source of information, Māori information, that may not be held within the families today, but they're written and recorded in those tribunal reports. So once you've worked through all of those things, you get to a point where, right, we know what the story is, we know who gave this, and we know how this happened. What do we do? Do we give it back? Do we sell it back? Do we negotiate a process where we share? There are a range of different things that one can do. When you're working with Māori community, you work at their pace, okay? Don't go there front up to the whānau and say, okay, we've got this property over here and we want to do something with it and we're thinking we might give it back to you, and so we'll do A, B, C and D. You'll get blank stares and get shown the door. They will want to know who you are for a start, and why are you coming to them? And how much do you know anyway? Okay? So just be aware that you need time to build the relationship before you can make progress. I've already heard talk about building the relationships now. Building the relationships. And don't think that you've got the right answer. Go in with an open mind and open heart and be prepared to listen. Land gifted, no longer used for its original purpose, and so on. I just want to finish shortly and I'll tell you a little bit of a good news story. The last line up there says costs. All of this costs money. All of it costs money. You've got legal fees to pay. You've got surveyors' costs to be met. You've got hospitality to be paid for, okay? Consider the costs of what you're doing. And perhaps, like our sisters earlier, you forgive the debt and do it yourselves. Just a couple of examples of work that we've done. We had a tuako parsonage that was no longer being used for its original purpose. The gentleman who gifted the land originally had passed. He did not have children who had survived. So the decision was made to give it back to the local marae committee, who continue to manage it now. Waimā parsonage, again, a little bit of two families involved in the land that was given. So the families themselves needed time to sort that out. There are cases where we've had land sold where we've taken a portion of that, the sale, and gifted it to the local hapū. Case in point, recently in 2024, we gifted some funds to Ngāti Tamaoho, south of the Bombays there, and they're using it for high school scholarships. And the last one is our Whirinaki church. Who knows where Whirinaki is? Yeah. You know that church on the hill? You go past it. 1904, it was gifted to the Methodist Church. The church and 2 acres. The gentleman who gave it over built the church. His son was an ordained Methodist minister, so he was the first stationing in that church. And over time, we discovered that the Land Court hadn't even recorded that gifting. It wasn't recorded until 1932. And it was registered under the Methodist Church. Since then, as I said, many of us here, congregations diminish, and the church has actually stood derelict for a number of years. But one of the whānau members kept insisting that we give it back. It's not being used for what it was originally gifted. And so we worked at it, and we came to a point where in October last year, we gifted that church back to the community, the church and its 2 acres. And who do we gift it to? The original donor is survived by a whole heap of grandchildren, but they formed a trust, one person from each of the original donor's children. And so that trust now have the task to maintain, to do what they will with the church. It was Methodist Church. When we did the handover, the trustees advised us that it would now become a community church, so any other hāhi has the ability to use the church. So that's just one example of the kind of work that we have done within Te Hāhi Wētiriana. Nā reira tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, ka nui te mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā ra tātou katoa.
Kia ora whaia, I thank you again. We have, a small acknowledgement and appreciation. The story of, the place of story in what you shared, and that also came through, I think, in our first weekend, and the importance of which story that is. The fact that there is an Indigenous story, an ancient story, and it's different from the ones, it's different from the translations. Those things really struck out, so yeah, tēnā koe, thank you. I wonder, for 30 seconds, please keep it tight. But just from the first 2 stories we've heard, turn to the person next to you. Just one thing that stuck out or one query you had that you would like to ask. Just 30 seconds, and then we'll come back in and welcome our third rōpū to speak today. If you've come alone, be brave, say hello. Kia ora koutou. I said I'd be quick. I'll bring us back in. We'll have after this session a little bit more of a hearty break, so keep those little nuggets, and we'll have the chance to continue to talk on there as well. Kia ora tātou. Tu te re mai ngā iwi. Yeah, there we go. That'll get him. Our third speakers this afternoon are Whaia Hazel Wanda and Adam Hape from Ngāti Apakura, alongside Archbishop Sir David Moxon. Archbishop David was the Anglican Archbishop of New Zealand from 2006 to 2013 and is passionate about Te Tiriti o Waitangi as the moral foundation in which we built and can build our nation. We're also very honoured to have our little rōpū from Ngāti Apakura coming to sharing about the story of return at land at Rangiawhia. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā hau i whātā tō katoa koe. Hui mai nei e tēnei ahi wera, e tēnei ahi ātāhua, tēnā koutou mate atu koutou e manaki. You're about to hear a story of abundance and mana enhancement and thriving in the early 19th century, which was then betrayed by an invasion, a pāhuatanga, a robbery, theft involving murder, and a war crime. The story will be told not by me, but by the people who are descended from those who survived. This particular experience of tragedy, crucifixion, contains within it, as you will hear, the seeds, the potential of resurrection. And it was the launching of a double-hulled waka, if you will, the hahi and the iwi, that has begun this whakaaro, this seeking, still a quest, incomplete, still in process. But there was a vision for hahi who were burned and dispossessed, hahi mihinare Māori, and Ngāti Apakura, Ngāti Hene too, who were also dispossessed and burned, some of the same people. But due to the courage of the missioner Māori of the time, e pā tēnā koe, mō ngā moemoea, mō ngā aroha, mō ngā mahi nunui, tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā koe, working with Ngāti Apakura Trust Board Chair and then later the iwi itself to produce the story you're about to hear. That's enough from me. It involves a story of Tikonga Pākehā Mihinari, that's to say the Anglican English-speaking diocese, including Auckland, but also Waikato, Taranaki and Wellington. Have a Bishop of Wellington present this afternoon. And Te Pihopatonga o Te Manawa o Te Wheke, the Māori mission region, the heart of the octopus, Te Manawa o Te Wheke, the partner, God willing, of the Pākehā Diocese. And Ngāti Apakura, Ngāti Hene tū Trust Board. It's an ongoing quest, it's incomplete. It involves some measure, the beginnings of restoration, but there's much more to go. And the sequence we hoped of a win-win has not been achieved. The hahi outcome is still being worked on with great passion and zeal, but has a work in progress. E te whaia tēnā koe, mo tō haerenga mai tēnā koe, ma te atua koe e manaki. E te rangatira Adam tēnā koe, hoki, ma te atua koe e manaki, tēnā kōrua. Whaia Hazel Wanda, who's going to speak, she likes to sit if she can. Okay, can we turn up?
Tēnā ra katoa, mihi ki te kai karakia. He mihi anō hoki ki tēnei whare tapu, tūtonu, tūtonu, tūtonu mai. I te taha tōku pāpā no hauraki au, i te taha tōku māma no apakura au, Kahotia marae is our present marae. I'm going to tell you this kōrero that was handed down to me from my mother, and it was handed down to my mother from our great-grandmother. And so it's going right back to the 1860s and that. So not too long ago, when I was in Standard 3, my mother asked me if I would go with her to the post office. And so when we got there, the postmaster explained that my mother had one of those family benefit books. And I don't know if any of you young ones know about the family benefit books, but you used to have to sign it. It was like a checkbook. And my mum, she never went to school, so she never knew how to write. And the postmaster said to me, can you write your mother's name and then your mum can trace over the name? So that's what I did. And from out of that, then I guess I realised, oh, I think I quite like doing this. And so my mum then started teaching me whakapapa. And the way that she taught me whakapapa is I needed to know what the stories were and what the name meant before she would do the next level of whakapapa. And of course, I was really shocked because one of my tupuna, this is her, Wikitoria. Oh, as you can see from there, we're talking about this place called Rangiowhia. Rangiowhia is out by, out in the Te Awamutu area. So, when Wikitoria was only young, perhaps she would have been in Standard 3 too, but she was only young, and in those days when the New Zealand Wars started, Cameron is recorded as asking for the women and the children not to be brought to the front where the war was going to be, and could they also then move the men and the troops then will have their fight out with the men away from the women and children. So then what happened is that this old pa site and Papakainga site within the Rangiowhia area, it was assigned because it was under the mission station, and it was assigned as a place of sanctuary for the women and the children in that. And so, yeah, so her name was Wikitoria at that time. She was only young. And what we had over there is we had what you call whare karakia. They were raupo whare karakia. So that's a picture of a raupo whare karakia. I only found that recently. But apparently they were called prayer house. So whare karakia. Yeah. So they, according to the survivors of this kōrero and what happened up here, there was a Catholic whare karakia. My tupuna was Catholic, and then there was also, I don't know whether it was CMS or Anglican. Yeah, whare karakia. And so on the Sunday mornings, what they would do with the kids is they would take them into the whare karakia, and they would have the early morning, you know, to bring on the dawn. And they would have their karakia then, and then after that, on the 21st of February 1864, then Wikitoria, she was assigned to go take the kids and take them down to the puna, because they had an outside bathroom at the puna, and she would take the kids down, give them their morning freshen up and wash and that, and then they would go to the what were referred to as wooden churches that were built there at Rangiawhia. So Wikitoria, she was down, taking the kids down to have this wash and prepare themselves for karakia. And then she heard all the noise, and she heard all of the footprints, the marching and everything like that. And all of a sudden then they got caught in the puna. Her and the kids stayed down in the puna. And what I'm just going to quickly relate to you is her eyewitness account of what happened to them while she was in the puna with these kids. So, what my mother said to me was that her eldest child, she named Tawera, because if you remember from that picture, what they were doing is they were burning. The soldiers burnt the whare karakia. They didn't only burn it, they burnt the mothers and the children and the elderly inside of the whare karakia. Then one of her children was called kirikowhai, so that's betrayal. They're talking about yellow, you know, betrayal. And that they thought that the woman and the kids were safe. They weren't safe. So they felt betrayed. And Te Pūmapi is another son. And so there is a, if you have a look up about the story of the soldiers when they came, they had this big cannon. I think, I can't remember what the name of it is, but they had a big cannon, and that's how come Te Pūmapi got his name. And then Te Pūpuhi is to do with the, you see how the wind is blowing out there, and it's to do with the way that the breeze that was blowing that morning actually helped to fan the fires. And rātapu was because it happened on the rātapu, it happened on a Sunday. And that, so she has had other children, but what happened is her mother wasn't there on that morning. Her mother had made an arrangement to go down to the, it was called Te Riu o Apakura. In other words, it was called the Valley of Apakura on the other side, down by Oturahanga. And so Wikitoria knew that, and so they stayed in the puna until it was dark, and then they trekked down to where her mother was. When they got there to where her mother was, then of course what they do is when something happens, like an event in history or whatever, then they change your name. And so her name got changed to Te Mamai. And that's what this kōrero is talking about, the mamai that happened at Rangiawhia. And that, is there anything else? Okay. So what were they doing there? Okay, so there was a deed, this is the chief Chief Kahawai, there was a deed of land signed over to the Catholic Church. And it was the, what's his name? It's the bishop. It was someone from the Tamaki Catholic. Yeah, that actually signed the deed with the chief. The thing about that deed is I actually went through it the other day, and I've got a lot of lines on it. It looks quite messy. Because I thought to myself, oh, I better document everything carefully. The thing is, you know, we're talking about giving land back, and that in this deed, they refer to it as one, so the soils, because why would you give your tupuna away? Hey, why would you give Papatūānuku away? If you come from Papatūānuku, why would you sign a deed and sign Papatūānuku away? So they used the kupu one, which is the soils. That's what was signed over. And I believe we got quite prosperous with that soil over there. Yeah. And what else did I want? Oh, that's right. So the other thing, it's really interesting the way that they measured the 290 odd acres out. The chief obviously got some young person like cousin here to walk from north to south and count your footsteps, and then walk from east to west, and they stepped it out. Because obviously, I don't know, maybe they didn't have measuring tapes that we have like we do these days. But there is some really interesting kōrero on that deed, because a lot of that language we don't use these days. It's old language from the 1800s in that. But yeah, I just came to share that because Bishop David's going to tell you the best part. In 2014, what happened is Waikato Tainui ended up organising memorial days for all of those sites that were attacked by the soldiers. And it was a really sad day for me, because as I walked down the road, and that, you know, who was sitting at the end of the road? Our king, and half of Waikato Tainui sitting in the middle of the bloomin' road. Why? Because we had not a foot of land, not a footprint of land. And there's all of these footprints that are all written in this deed, but there was not a footprint of land. And as I walked down the road, there was a lot of Apakura people. They just were looking at the land and crying and that. And so I'm really thankful for those who organised today. I feel humbled to be here, and it restores my faith in humanity. And I'm so thankful for that. But I'll pass you over to Bishop David now.
Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi ki a koe tāku whanaunga o tō kōrero o te whakapapa o Ngāti Apukura. He kōrero tino mamai. Hei anō he kōrero tino aroha. Huri noa ki rātou. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity for allowing us to come here and speak and share our story. I do apologise, and I'm extremely sorry, but we seem to have got the sequence around the wrong way. Usually they leave the best for last, and yet here I am. Ko arama hape, ko eram hape ahau, ngō Ngāti Mani o Poto, Ngāti Apukura te hapū, ki te taha o tōku māma ko Ngai Tūhoi. Ko au te kaikarakia o te pāriha o Rangi Awhia, Paura Tapu. My name's Adam and I come from the parts of the beautiful Waikato, Ngāti Mani o Poto and Ngāti Apukura. I'm the kaikarakia for that church up there on display, St. Paul's, Rangi Awhia. In 2019, the then Waikato Missioner, Father Cruz, established a more regular karakia in Māori. And from there, we've just continued on offering karakia in that space. It also is a recognition for our whakapapa, our whānau's whakapapa. There were 5 churches, as I believe, that were established in its time during Rangi Awhia. So it is important, not only for me, for a lot of people, that continues and that is acknowledged as well. There is conversations around, at the moment, negotiations, land negotiations, but it is good that we are there before iwi start to move back into Rangi Awhia and back into the area. So do pray for us. It has been a journey. I'd like to also reiterate what our good friend, Reverend Dr. Arapira, mentioned, and that it is important to consult all parties, and sometimes it involves iwi that we haven't really thought about and other parties concerned. So that is important that we have those negotiations. But yeah, so from here, under Father Cruz, my wife and I were placed out at Rangi Awhia, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's been fantastic, and what lies ahead is more amazing and what I look forward to seeing. We've started netball groups under the Pāriha, and that's been going well. We have 5 teams now. We started kapahaka through Father Cruz, and we've continued that on every year. So, and it's really nice to see whānau coming back, but it was also good to see our church full with Tangata Tiriti as well. So, and looking at what bicultural could mean in its beauty in its entirety, how co-partnership can work in co-ownership. But this is a tapu. It has been a tapu journey. And as you can understand through what whānau went through, the mamai and the hurt and distrust, we have our work cut out for us. And hence why I ask that you pray for us. Thank you.
I've been asked to say one more thing, and her word is my command. Hazel wanted me to say that in the course of the discussions between the iwi and the hahi, which were complex, robust, had their ups and downs, and a need for a huge amount of ho'ohitorongo, diligence, research, all the things we heard earlier, I couldn't wish for a better list e te tumuaki of your mahi. That's really the answer to today, what you wrote about process, to take time to consult. And out of a very complicated and bumpy process, which is still incomplete, we managed to buy by raising a mortgage and entering a very complicated, unpredictable auction, 11 acres, which you can see between the church and further up to the top of the screen, which was handed back to Ngāti Apukura as a title deed to begin the process of re-establishing papakainga, marae, maara and orchards and the socio-economic fruit and veg business that was burned to the ground and taken in 1864. Only 11 acres. What interested me is that Nanaia Mahuta, who's heading up the claim to the Crown for the invasion, which is separate from Ngāti Maniapoto, Waikato Tainui. It's an Apukura Henetu, like Parihaka really, unique scene. She surprised us all recently. These are Waikato Dawson School for Girls alumni, which might explain it partly, but she said to us, the claim to the Crown for the loss of all this land will include compensation to the Māori Hāhi Mehenare, because they were there and they were also burned to the ground. So that's very much a work in progress, but we are committed to seeing that outcome happen as well as the rejuvenation of a socio-economic base and a whenua base, which will see them return to the mana enhancement they enjoyed before the invasion. Kei te pai tērā? So, yeah, tēnā koe.
We are so humbled that you have come to share this with us, acknowledging how tapu it is, and again have a small appreciation and token of our thanks. So tēnā koe whaia, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Sure, we'll be glad for a chance to stretch our legs. We'll take 10 minutes. Please, again, think of those sparks, think of those connections as we slowly weave this wānanga and different stories together. Do feel free to, don't go too far, but you can come sit outside on the steps for a bit, get some fresh air. Bathrooms, as a reminder, through the left and on the back. There's a bit of water as well. Rejuvenate. I'll do a 2-minute warning, and then we'll come back and join us inside again. Kia ora.
Is that easier? Yeah, we'll lay it out and then you can have a look around, eh? Is that all right?
Just a quick pānui. The placards and information that Whaia Hazel shared, feel free to come have a look, read a little bit more at the front if you would like.
Yes. Kia ora, Sarah. Thank you for being here. Oh, yes, so I apologise.
Sorry, I'll just grab the keys of Bishop and I'll put these away in our car. Thank you.
I do remember that because with the Anglican school. The Anglican school board, I was chair, I would have hit, because it's outside my office. That's what can happen. Like your dad. You can give us a talk on the theology of it all. Well, we got a bit of that. We got a bit of that. The stories today are all about seeds and it shows you can begin to heal the pain in the past. It's never straightforward, it's never perfect, but you get a measure of it.
I would love to see more accessibility for regular homeowners to have some way of connecting and being part of reconciliation. So I think it would be really great if we were able to somehow, like when someone sells a house, how everyone knows that we give a percentage of our money to the real estate agent. But how cool would it be if nationwide we had a little checkbox that said what a percentage we would like to give back to Māori, like when everyone sells their house, because pretty much everyone's house is on stolen land, right? And I think that part of that is like a lot of my friends and people that I know don't even realise that their house belongs to them. And same as churches. So there's a guy in our church at Wānanga Baptist who did a research project, and he researched the land of our church and whether or not it was stolen or not. And he's produced this big book, and we've got it published in our church for you. And at the end of it, it doesn't say any solutions. It just said, concludes, yes, it was stolen.
So you asked what was even another claim to the crown. Yes, it's a claim to the crown for the Whenua who's acting for the tribe to get some of the orchard land with Ngāti Whakakura. That's what I believe.
Kia ora koutou, this is your 2-minute warning. Grab a cup of water and please make your way back to your seats. We're going to get going in 2 minutes.
As you can see from it today, if you are still using the money
Kia ora anō. Can I invite you to please take your seats, finish up your conversations. We have 2 more wonderful stories to be shared and then some time for Q&A. So please do grab a seat and we'll get started in a few 30 seconds. If I could ask our ushers to maybe just go around and grab people and invite them to rejoin. Thank you.
Retitling stuff which has got, what's the word for it now? The word for historically protected angle views. There's a word for view shafts. Yes, it's got several view shafts. And also, it's regional council, farmland. Now, so a farmer can buy it, but if you wanted to put a eye on it, you'd have to go through Te Mene Kōkiri to change the nature of the land for whakakainga housing and marae development.
Kia ora, we're going to grab our seats again. I feel like I need a stronger teacher voice or something. I can start naming people. A reminder as you take your seat that QR code on the board. Hopefully you've managed to get set up. Hopefully there are some questions appearing. You can vote on which questions you would like to hear a response to. Tu te mai ngā iwi. We'll try again, eh? Tu te mai ngā iwi. Tātou, tātou e. Tu te mai ngā iwi. Tātou, tātou e. Kaya. Tātou, tātou e, tātou, tātou e. It's my absolute honour to introduce our 4th speaker this afternoon. We'll have about an hour in here together and then a proper cup of tea to continue talking. But we'll have our 4th and 5th speakers and then our Q&A discussion. So our 4th speaker this afternoon is the Reverend Dr. Wayne Te Kawa. Matua Wayne is kai whakaako matua at Hoani Tapu Te Kai Kōwhau i Te Rongopai, St. John's Theological College, and an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And he was instrumental in the return of land at Maunga Hohatu in Te Uruwera by the Presbyterian Church, a story which he will share with us, among others, today. Would you join me in welcoming Matua Wayne?
I'll figure this out. Tuatahi ka hia iau ki te mihi rā ki kia Tā Paura Reeves. I just want to briefly acknowledge the late Sir Paul Reeves. My first time in the cathedral was at the funeral service for Sir Paul Reeves. And I remember that, jumping on the buses from Holy Sepp, coming up here, having the service here, then jumping back in the buses up to Huani Tapu for his burial, and then back to Holy Sepp on the buses. And I think there were about 4 busloads of us, and I think we had a police escort, and we we ran every red light in Auckland. My second time here was in the old cathedral across the way there, speaking at a conference on peace and conflict, and I spoke on this particular subject, maunga pōhatu. And I do want to acknowledge my whanaunga over there, Alan Maxwell and his daughter Leilani. This is their story. From maunga pōhatu, from Tamakai Moana, and also not only is it our iwi story, our hapū story, our marae story, it's also the story of his great-great-great-great-great-grandmother Huhana, who is one of the matriarchs of the Olsen whānau in Te Whaiti. So tēnei te mihi ki a koe, Alan. I'm mentioning you and Leilani, so hopefully you'll feel so inspired at the end that you'll sing my waiata. And I also want to acknowledge my colleague at the back there, Jakali, kia ora Jakali, and all our students from Huani Tapu, and our new students coming in. I see Byron over there, and our old students. I see Ruth over here. I'm naming you fellas all, so I hope you all will jump up with Alan from my way out there at the end. As mentioned, I'm a minister in the Presbyterian Church. I don't know how many years. I was ordained last century. That'll give you an idea. And so I'm going to talk about some of our mission land in maunga pōhatu that we returned to the local hapū. So here's our maunga pōhatu. I reckon we should just sit here for the rest of the day and just admire that beautiful maunga. And we, as Tūhoi, are descendants of the maunga. Other iwi have migration stories. We don't have a migration story, we have a creation story. Ka moi te karaua, te maunga kia hene pū kohurangi, ana ka puta ko pōtiki tike. So maunga pōhatu married hene pū kohurangi, and they had a child by the name of Pōtiki tike, who was created, born in this whenua. So we have a creation story. Isn't it so beautiful? Couple of things, 4 points I wanted to point out. One, distinguishing between myth and facts. 2, negotiating iwi politics. 3, negotiating church politics. And 4, looking towards the future. So I grew up, my father is from maunga pōhatu, from the Te Kawa whānau. My grandmother married, you can see, he's on the next slide. His mother married Rua Kenana's son, Whatu. He built his community in maunga pōhatu, you can see it there. Early 1900s, all sorts of stuff happened. Crowd moved in 1916, and he was arrested. 2 people were shot and killed, one of them being my grandfather. And Rua was arrested, put into Mount Eden prison, blah, 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 blah. Rua got out, and here I'm going to go into, this is how we talk about it in Tūhoi in the Presbyterian Church, ka puta mai a te Rua. Hoki ia ki maunga pōhatu, kei reira te mihana perihipi tiri ana a Huani Rōtene, ana ka hoa atu a te Rua o ona tamariki mokopuna me te whenua ki te hāhi. So when Rua got out of Mount Eden prison, he went home, and he got there was a Presbyterian minister from Scotland originally, by the name of John Lawton, and Rua gifted his land and his children to Huani Lawton to build a mission and a school. And that's what we all grew up with on the marae. We hear it all the time. And here's a an image of Rua Kenana and John Lawton. So what's myth and what's fact? And so that did happen. We did build a mission and a school. Here's the original school here, that one on the top. That's the old dance house. So basically, Honi Lawton wanted to build a church in Maunga Pōhatū, and Rua said, no, I'll never ever consent to a church being built in my community. They said that John Lawton he wasn't happy. He went down and he was at the pigsty and he was crying, and Rua said to him, he hato mate. What's wrong? What are you crying for? Oh, you know, I'm a Presbyterian minister. We always want to have our own church, but you won't allow us to have a church in Rua. And this is fact. And Rua said to him, haiaha, ara tō hāhi, waku tamariki mokopuna. Kia koe nā tamariki nā mokopuna. You have the children and my grandchildren, waihona pakeke kia hau, but leave the old people to me. And then he said, ara, there's your school building over there. And the house over there, there was Alan, your kuia, there was Huhana's whare. And he said, and I'll give that whare for you to stay in. That was the transaction, and you can see the photo here. They were all at the dance house, and that became the school. And those are all the children that Rua gifted, and my father's in there somewhere. And so that was fact. And then we come to the Whenua. So in 1925, the church, and it was working really well, and the church said, hey, we want to make our commitment to Maunga Pōhatū permanent. Can you, Mr. Lawton, can you please negotiate for 10 acres of land so we can build a full mission station and a school? No, we didn't know about that. And so basically, they said Rua gave the land and it was gifted to the Presbyterian Church. And that's the old mission house there. On the side was a little chapel like that. It was about from here to there, to there, to there. You could fit the missionary minister in there and about 5 people in there. And when I went up there, it was falling over like that. 1959, urban migration, everything happened, everyone moved, and Rua left Maunga Pōhatū, settled in Matahi. And so basically there was nobody there. And we closed the parish, 1959 I think it was around about there. And so the land had basically been sitting there since 1959. We put it into the farm there, and so the farm could use it and whatnot, but the church still retained the Whenua. 1991 I began my journey in the church, and this is our marae at Maunga Pōhatū. Te Māpau, and we had our synod meeting in there, and the local hapū said, hey, you know that Whenua, and the Whenua is right next to the marae, 10 acres. Still had our old buildings on it, and Deaconess Cottage, and Uncle Mahue, who was our crow at the time, said, hey, you know the church Whenua over there, would you consider giving it back to the hapū? And the answer was yes, we would. Great. That was 1990, and I was sitting in there, and I listened to them. Oh, this is really interesting. Okay. Yeah. And then I went home in 2002, 2007, it came up again. The land still hadn't been transferred because there were a lot of issues that needed to be negotiated. So I was asked to pick it up and try and advance it. And here's where the myth and the facts. So, one, the land was never ever gifted. Rua tried to gift the land. The Crown wouldn't agree to it because of this thing here. It's called Te Uruwera A purchase. In the 1920s, the government was moving through the Uruwera, and they were purchasing land. And individualising titles. And here's the shot of the Uruwera. I think there's about 500,000 acres of the Uruwera that the government purchased. So how it goes like this was Hey, you look like the rangatira of this place here. I tell you what, I'll give you 1,000 acres of land over there. Hey, you look like you're a bit of a rangatira. I tell you what, I'll give you 2,000 acres of land over here. Of course, that chap over there says, it's not my land, that's his land. And this guy says, it's not my land, it's his land. Oh, look, don't worry about it. Here's your title, you have the title. And we have this story in Suhoi, we call it Warurau. Warurau, 800 acres of land. So basically the story was, they gave him, here's your title, 800 acres. It's not my land. Well, it's in your name now, so you own this. They got him absolutely sozzled that night. So drunk that he couldn't stand up, so drunk that he couldn't even write. And they pulled out the title deed, the purchase. And here, sign here, and he was absolutely drunk. He couldn't hold the pen. So they held his hand and they signed it here. And then woke up in the morning and said, oh, thank you, here's your money. What's the money for? Oh, you just sold your 800 acres of land to us. And so all of a sudden the Crown owned the land. Mate Kuare, your karaua, I think, was given 2,500 acres of land in another part of Suhoi that belonged to somebody else. Oh, don't worry about it, look, we'll buy it off you. And so all of that happened, and by 1925, I think, the Crown had purchased 500,000 acres of land. And so when John Norton said, look, I just bought land from Rua Kenana, he went to register it at the land purchase office. Sorry, it's illegal, can't be done. Why? Because he doesn't own the land. The Crown, we own the land. So you will have to buy the land from us. So it was a legal form of confiscation. And that was really, really sad. And I remember when I presented that to the hapū and to the hahi, they were really, I wouldn't say angry, they were just deeply grieved over that. And so, okay, so what are we going to do? And I remember one of my elders, Tamitako, said, well, look, nā te karauna I tai hai, te whenua, whakahoki at te whenua ki te karauna. The Crown pinched the land, give it back to the Crown. I said, oh, absolutely no way. No way, we are going to own our land again. So I became the principal negotiator for the Presbyterian Church. My two cousins, Richard and Kiritsuya Marae, they became the principal negotiations for the Te Māpou Papakainga Trust. That's our marae and maunga pōhatu. And then we had to negotiate our iwi politics. So when it was announced we are going to give this back, there were whānau showing up, oh, it's our land. My tūpuna lived on this whenua. It's our land, you've got to give it back to us. Another whānau walked in, oh, no, it's not their tūpuna, it's my tūpuna's land. My tūpuna owned this land before it went to the church, so you have to give it to us. Oh, here we go. And so I said to Richard and Kiritsuya, kia kōrua tērā. You guys sort that out, but my hapū, my marae, I was involved in that. And then you had some missionary whānau who were missionaries there in maunga pōhatu. Oh, but it was given to the person. It's our whenua. And so you had all these dynamics. So one, establishing the facts from the myth to negotiating your iwi politics. And with iwi politics goes this stuff here, church politics. Church and politics. Presbyterians are a strange people. Kia ora, Jordan. And the Presbyterian Church, I say we suffer from this thing called white saviorism. Presbyterians love telling you the story of Rua Kenana and Suhoi, blah, 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 blah. And it's building the white missionary up to be the saviour of these barbaric, cannibalistic, heathen, pagan Suhoi people, which was their mean be. And every time I look at our old records and stories, it's always about the white missionary. They never mention the Māori. They'll mention Rua Kenana, he's famous, but who's ki hora te pua pe? First Māori ordained in the Presbyterian Church. Hemi Nikora. You never read stories on them. Hemi Pōtato, first Māori to graduate from our Presbyterian Seminary in Dunedin, you hardly read stories of them. And when there's a story in our Presbyterian magazines, newspaper, it's all on the white missionary who converted them and brought them to the Lord and saved them. And so I had to negotiate that white saviorism within the Presbyterian Church. So basically we decided, we sorted out the iwi stuff, yep, okay, it'll go to Te Māpō Papakainga Trust. Every person in Maunga Pōhatu is part of that. So we sorted out that, and then came to the church one, right, we're going to give the title back to the Tūhoe, back to the Māpō Papakainga Trust. Oh, have you been to this church committee? Who? Why do I need to go there? Have you been to the church property trustees? Who are they? Oh, they hold all the titles. Oh, do they now? And so it had to go there, had to go to that committee, had to get them. And they said, yes, we will give the title back, and we will be there, and we will present. No, you will not be there. I haven't invited you. Oh, well, we're going to be there. Had to go to something called the Council of Assembly, the governing body of the church, and they discussed it. Yes, we will support it, and we will send our council convener and the moderator of the Presbyterian General Assembly, and they will be there, and they will... Actually, I haven't invited you yet. You're not invited to our party. Oh, no, this is a church-wide party. So I negotiated my way through that. They all showed up, and I said, look, you're not the focus, okay? The focus is on us. This is our whenua, that we are giving back to our hapū, our iwi, because the leaders in the Presbyterian Church, when that was done, one of them was Rod Medill, and Rod was still alive. He was about 103. He sent his family up. And I said to him, Rod, why did you and others leave the Māori mission? And he said, because it was Māori mission in name only. All the leaders were white male. The Māori, who were the ordained ministers, were in the back row. And he said, one meeting, I turned and looked. I said, this is not right. I've got to go into the back row. They've got to come into the front row. And he did that. And he and Lloyd Carter, another missionary who was in Maunga Pōhatu, Te Whaitiri Tāhuna, they all decided it's time for us to leave and let Māori take over their own mission. But when the day came, they all came up. They sent all their... we had hundreds of people in the middle of winter in Maunga Pōhatu where it snows. But they came, and they came and they took part in it. The moderator of the Presbyterian Church showed up, church property trustees showed up. Sadly, we kind of got pushed to the side. But I said, I don't particularly care if I have to stand in the toilet. I just want this to be done. So it was done. And then, Anglicans, they love the gate crash, don't they? Honeka. Hone was teaching at St. John's College in the days when it was Tarau College, and he phoned me up, Oi! Oh, yes, Archdeacon. I'm coming to this event at Maunga Pōhatu and I'm bringing St. John's. Oh, yes. So he showed up and he said, this is a redemptive moment in the history of your church. And he said, and it's important, I want to be there. And so I call this a redemptive moment in history in the Presbyterian Church. Hone showed up, 12 students from St. John's, they all hopped out. Oh man, how a big buggers, huge like that. And I was looking at Chris Huriwai, Tapu, Michael, Tamihere, Don Tamihere. And I was saying, oh, look at the size of you guys. You're going to eat the marae out. But it was great that they were there to share in what Hone was rightly said, a redemptive moment in the history of the church. Tururua Flabber was there, the MP from the Māori Party. He was in Parliament, he was there. And he took this story back to Parliament, and I tuned into Parliament, and he spoke about this whole event. Yeah. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful event. We got there in the end. We had to find out what was myth, what was fact, negotiate iwi politics, negotiate church politics. And then there was one other, why Richard and Kiri Tsuya and myself said this is going to happen. We don't care how. is because Tūhoi were in the middle of negotiating their settlement claim. And they were ready to sign, and John Key said, sorry, we can't do it. Giving you back the Uruwera is a bridge too far. We can't do it. Settlement was cancelled. So Richard Kirituya and I said, we're going to make this happen. We're going to show them it can be done. You can give land back without any conditions. And when we gave the whenua back, there were no conditions attached to it. We did that. A couple of months after, I was the minister in Te Teko, Texas. And it was 4:30 in the morning. I was restless. I couldn't sleep. I was still on a high. Yeah, we did it. We returned the land, no conditions, a model for the government to follow in their Tūhoi settlement. My house was about here. Where that house over there is was the police station. And there was just a paddock between us. And I couldn't sleep that night, and I got up and made a coffee, and I looked out the window. I thought, oh, look at all those police cars there. Oh, look at all those trucks with satellites on. Wow, look at those people with black on and guns. Somebody's going to get a visit. That was the day of the raid in Huruatoke. And I tell you, when I found out about it that afternoon, I was absolutely angry. Yeah, hence the reason why we wanted to do that, was we wanted to show the government it can be done, and that was the government response. Now, Jordan, I'm going to start talking about you. So that was all over and done with, and then I was lecturing at Otago University. I had a couple of students there, and it became radicals, Rohan and a few others. And I used to talk about the land back, how it's so important. And I used to talk about Maunga Pōhatsu, and Te Whaiti was another one. I did that one quietly. And then Rohan and I think Jordan was involved in that, and a few others. They came up with this, hey, let's make this part of the constitution of the church, of our code of practice, of our book of order, that rather than, okay, we finished at that church, we're going to sell it, put it on the market, sell it for commercial, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And then this group said, actually, let's put a rule to the church. I said, well, follow the treaty process. And I said, in our treaty process, if the Crown has land that it no longer needs, then they give first right of refusal to our iwi. And so basically they came up with this rule that when the Presbyterian Church is finished with land and buildings, they give first right of refusal to the iwi. You'll never get it through General Assembly. Presbyterians are conservative. And it went through General Assembly, and here's a shot. It was all online, COVID days. And I took this photo there of the vote, and it went through unopposed. and I thought, well, actually, that's a starting point. That's a starting point. And we'll revisit this later on down the track. So anyway, Alan, have you got my waiata ready? Thank you.
What's the word?
Wairua tapu. Wairua tapu, tau mai rā. Wairua tapu, mai runga. Uria mai, ngā tonga. O mai toa roha. Wahia. Kia ora tātou. Oh, you might as well do the flower thing, eh? The flowers. No one the flowers, just give me the money. Oh.
Tēnā koe mātua, thank you. We do have flowers and koha, so please, yeah, that's exceptional. It struck me about your whakaaro, the length of time. Did you say that 1990 was the first time that was raised and the deed was transferred? 2007. Yeah. Our final and fifth speaker this afternoon is Simon Oosterman-Beckers. Simon and his whānau have been exploring the return of land at Little Kōrero farm in West Auckland to Te Kōrero Amaki, and he'll share about how the story and journey is going so far. Would you please help me in welcoming Simon?
Definitely not the best till last. You might notice that I don't have as many titles in front of my name, so I've decided it'll be Cosplay Farmer Simon Oosterman-Beckers. So we asked mana whenua what the name was of the stream that splits through our property, and the name has been forgotten. And the kaumātua said to me, he said, "You don't understand, Simon, when you forget the name of a stream, it's like forgetting the name of your grandmother." It's not that they didn't care, it's just that the colonisation in West Auckland ran so deep that the name of essentially our grandmother has been forgotten. So around 5 years ago, my mother and my twin brother and my partner decided that we would pool our property to buy something a little bit cheaper out west. And so we bought a property in the foothills of Oratea in Waitakere Ranges, and no one wanted it because it was a floodplain. I thought, this is great because I love conservation. And early on, we'd agreed that we wanted to return a significant portion of that land back to mana whenua. And what we did was we went to find out who is mana whenua of the area, because if you know Auckland, you know that there is contested ownership of land. And so one of the things, does anyone know Oratea? There is an Oratea Historical Society. We have our own, in fact, we've got two competing ones. One's a little bit more political. I think they actually just call it a historical society, but it was actually a group to challenge water care, but anyway, we'll just forget about that. Yeah, we've got our own little museum. We've got we've got the two oldest houses in Waitakere. And if you pop down to the bowling club, which you can't quite see, it's just up in the corner, you'll actually hear the old boys who play bowling. They talk about the history of Oratea. And even the website of Oratea proudly says, it talks about the people who first settled here. And of course, they're talking about the Dalmatians. It is not just the names of the streams that have been forgotten, it is the name of the people whose rohi it is. You know, people who were here well before there was orchards or a museum or a bowling club. And when we looked at the land itself, it actually told the same story. Who's driven through Oratea recently? You can still see the apple crates around. Most of the orchards have been abandoned. If you look at the streams where there's not much ngāhere left, you will see European invasive species. It'll be poplar, it'll be willow. Why did they plant them? Because of course the land was cleared. Actually our hill, when we bought the hill, we did a soil test because you got to, right, because there's pesticides in Oratea. And it said we had lignite in the hill, and we were like, we've got coal. I've been fighting to end coal for decades. But it turned out it's burnt kauri. So, you know, the trees that they couldn't be bothered floating down, they just burnt them. So, so the land actually tells the same story of colonisation. And eventually we learnt that our property in particular, if we do, you know, excellent, you know, the history of finding out who owns your property, you should share your slide, because we didn't know, we just figured it out. Our land was taken as a part of the Hikurangi purchase. What we did was that we went to Te Kōrero Amaki and we said, hey, we want to give you the land back. We very specifically do not talk about gifting land, because I fundamentally believe you cannot gift land, especially if it was stolen. It is a relationship with the land that matters. And so we said we want to give it back, and what they said surprised us. The first thing was, why did you buy a floodplain, you fools? The second one was, why would you waste money on a subdivision to give us the land, just give the land back. And we said, what do you mean? Give the land back to itself. You just got to restore it. So that's what we did. And so I'm just going to talk about what happened with us. This is just our story. So I've got permission to share it from Te Kawaramaki, not from my family. I didn't bother asking them. This is our story. And so I think there's some lessons here around what we can do and what we can't do. And so there's no right or wrong, but I think the thing that matters is the relationship with your land and with the mana whenua. That is what matters. And I liked your story about the two-hole waka. I like that one. I often share that in union spaces. Partnership is a two-hole waka. And to change the direction of the waka, someone's going to get a little bit of water splashed in their face, but it's worth it for a horizon. That's what the story was. There's a lot of water splashed in faces. So look, if we're lucky enough to have your own home, and many Aucklanders don't even have a home, I live in a caravan because they're waiting for a house to be renovated. Let's remember, we have people who live in caravans because they have no choice. If you're lucky enough to have a home, you'll probably have a mortgage, and that makes giving land back very difficult because you don't own the land. The bank owns the land. So that's one of the things that we had to think about. So, the issue is not a moral failure of wanting to give land back. It's the reality of living in a property-based capitalist system that we have to live with. And the option that works for private landowners, I think, is different than for a church or for institutions. But I also don't think we should just wait either for others to do this. So the next solution is, of course, subdivision. So it seems straightforward. Carve off the land, change the title, give the land back, but actually it's not that easy. And our property was particularly difficult. This is the wrong order. So this is our bamboo grove that we had. Tallest bamboo grove in West Auckland, it turned out, also the largest. How do we know that? Because the movie Prey 2 wanted to film in it, and they told us, and we said, sorry, we're chopping it down. To remove that bamboo was well over $100,000, okay? And so bamboo, first thing. Then there's earthworks, and then there's consultants, and then there's the consultants. Didn't know that was a thing. There's a name for it. And then there was the reports, and then there was the reports about the reports. And by that point, we stopped counting how much it cost. It was up to $800,000, and we were just like, what are we talking about? And so, we obviously realised why no developer bought the land, because it wasn't worth it. But we bought it because we want to return it. So the issue is that technically it's subdividable, but realistically, if you had $800,000, is this what you're going to spend the money on? And it's certainly not. And when we spoke to the iwi, they were like, don't be stupid. You don't need to spend $800,000. We don't need it. Kaitiaki, look after the land. So the next thing we looked at, ironically, is a little piece of English law known as covenants. So covenants are a legal arrangement that sits with the land, not with those who own the land. So we're probably all familiar with QE2 covenants. Anyone here got a QE2 covenant? So you get your land, you plant it out, you put a covenant on it, and it is forever. You can't touch it, you can't change it. Now, there's no reason why you can't use a covenant to give authority to mana whenua in the land, just like developments give authority to developers to only have a certain type of house. There's nothing to stop us doing that. Has it been done before? No idea. No one has ever offered land back to Te Kawaramaki before, so they didn't know. We've looked around, couldn't find anything. There's still a cost to it, as you've shared, so it's not free, but it's certainly an option that we can do. And so we've been looking at that, and we've been dealing with it with the iwi. There are some barriers. We have a covenant with the council, and trying to merge the two has proven difficult. So is it an option for everyone? I think if there is strategic value in your land, then it might be worth doing. But let's be honest, the majority of people who live in Auckland, if you are lucky enough to own a house, the average size of the property is 300 square metres, and the average size of the house is at least a third of that. So the ability to apply subdivision for most properties is almost zilch for the majority of people. That's if you can even subdivide. Covenants are another opportunity that you can apply, but again, if you've only got 150 square metres of land on your property, does the iwi need extra work managing a small piece of marginal land? Particularly, Te Kawaramaki is one of the smallest iwi in the country. They weren't just dispossessed, but their numbers were devastated and they were displaced. And they've come back now. But remember, they don't even have a marae. Do they necessarily want Simon's 200 square metres of land in Sunnyvale? Not necessarily. So there's a question around relationships. In our case, luckily, our property actually has quite high significant ecological value. So that's Iggy. She's 80. She has a name. She's known. She's one of the oldest residents of Oratia. That's my son. We also have kakahi, which is freshwater mussels, including Aucklandikai, which are very rare. There is value in our land beyond just giving the land back. This is a special piece of land. One of the other things with our property is that just by chance, the property we bought, 50 metres of planting will connect the west coast of Waitakere to the harbour for the first time in more than 150 years. So with a little bit of clever thinking, we managed to secure some land that has strategic value, that is worth having a covenant for the iwi. But even then, the iwi said, don't worry about it. Being kaitiaki is the most important thing. If it costs you money, don't spend it. So I think the key thing here is that it's about responsibility and relationships with allyship. You don't have to own land to do this, but I won't lie. I've spent my entire adult life hoping that I would finally have some land that we could gift back, but we could be gifting back a burden, so look after the land, restore it. Don't, where I grew up in Reta Whakaitu, near where some of our speakers are from, we had some land that was given back, but it was the polluted farm land. That's, but don't think just because your land's not polluted that there isn't a burden, One of the things I think is important, and there's some people here who are involved in this, I can see there's some volunteers in here who help with our planting, is that recently, are we all familiar with Te Kauramaki's deed for the Waitakere Ranges? What you may not know is that Hobson Choice and a bunch of people who do not live in West Auckland went and leafleted all the communities and said, Te Kauramaaki wants to steal your land. Private land was never a part of it, and so even if you don't have land, some of the people here spoke up and said, this is what's going on, and they shared their relationship, and for us, we were able to say, hang on, we offered the iwi land, and they said no, because Te Kauramaaki are there to look after the land. And so for us, giving land back is not just about physically giving the land back, but it is land back in the minds of Pākehā who have forgotten the history of the land, and also to give the land back to itself by restoring it, which is what we have been doing. So, my property actually has 3 streams. The one through the middle is the one that we forgot the name of. It's actually called Kōrero Stream, and we thought that was a Māori name. It turns out that was the name of a nudist colony. And they literally just did Kōrero and Remu. Portmanteau, I think is the word. But we actually have 2 other streams. We have one stream at the back, which is called the Oratia Stream. Now, the actual original name is known. It is Waihoratiu, the stream of slips. Now, Oratia, during the Auckland floods, we flooded, and we firsthand saw why our property is so important, because if you don't have floodplains, it goes where you don't want it. And so, the stream of slips, that knowledge wouldn't have stopped us from buying the land, but maybe some of those racists who were putting things in letterboxes, maybe they would have cared about what the original name of the stream was, and maybe they wouldn't have bought those properties which got wiped out. It's not just important to acknowledge mana whenua because it's the right thing to do, but because there is knowledge about the land that matters for decisions we're making. It is a practical thing. So, yeah, land back, not just to the people, but as a memory and to the land itself. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Simon. I was really struck, by that response from that kaumātua of giving the land back to itself. So one of the ways that theft was so instrumental in the settlement of Aotearoa was through this idea of wastelands, right? So even just thinking what restored land being used looks like could, inadvertently read Pākehā ideas onto it. It's a stunning example of what this kaupapa could so entail. Thank you. As promised, we have some good time for Q&A now. And I think, just again to give ourselves a quick moment, 30 seconds to the person next to you, there on the screen again if you need that. Just distill your question or look on your phone and you can vote for other questions people have already asked. What's the one question you'd really like to see? 30 seconds, aside your question, add it, vote. We're going to set up our wonderful speakers behind the tables here and then we'll get into it. We started at about 10 past, so we might go to about 5 or 10 past, but if people do need to go, okay, to pai, but we'll hopefully have at least 25 minutes for discussion. Cool. Okay, discuss. It's just because there's so many folks give you 20 more seconds. Get your questions on to Menti. Excellent. Let's draw back together and we have the chance to hear from our wonderful panel. So just for our speakers, we have two microphones. There's a fair few of you. You're not compelled to answer every question, but please just grab a mic and jump in as you see fit. And feel free to keep adding as we keep discussing. The most popular question by some margin is quite broad, is about what Tangata Tiriti landowners should know before approaching hapū and iwi. I wonder, A lot of these stories were highlighted the existing relationships, generational relationships, and potentially also highlighted existing knowledge about land, or at least knowledge that could be uncovered, although there were some exceptions. Where do you start for rebuilding those relationships, and where do you start for discovering those stories, especially as Tangata Tiriti? Big question, but any practical thoughts on where to start? Sort of fire. Should be on, yeah. Just speak into it, yeah.
So we talk about Apakura because we were all exiled after the soldiers did that to us. We talk about Apakura now being in the Trail of Tears. And that's where we are right now. We're still in the Trail of Tears. And so what was your question? Oh, I've forgotten.
It was about, I guess, reopening those things. I guess they're long processes, like you said.
Yeah, it's a long process.
It's not a start and an end.
You know, what's happened over in Te Awamutu, we now have a prison farm there. I mean, it was an industrious place, you know. We had prosperity and all of that. They were gardens and what have you. But we now have a prison over there. Then we also now have a mental health facility. So before that, before the soldiers came, we just had the hahi, the churches. And from what I understand, they lived a very good life.
Please, that's right.
Kia ora. Much like any relationship, if you're giving unsolicited advice without knowing what they're after, that's not going to be received well. My brother went overseas for a number of years and came and told me what I need to start doing for my job. And I explained to him that he doesn't know me anymore. It's been a good 12 years since we've hung out. Much like that, it's all about whanaungatanga. So at the start of the day, we all sat together to get to know each other so we could start banding those stories off each other and try to understand where each of us are coming from. And if you're going in like any relationship, it's about having that time with those people, and they're going to be welcoming. You're still going to find some people who might jiggle you, but that's true of any workplace or any church or any sports club. So just like you would with any other relationship, you'd build on that relationship to then approach that point of view. Just very much like you would expect them to do if they were coming in to try to work with something in your whānau. Like just so, as you would like to be treated, treat others.
Kanohi ki te kanohi, face to face. Maunga Pōhatu, 1916, 2 people shot, blah, blah, blah. 2016, we had the centenary of that event at Maunga Pōhatu. And there was this pākehā guy sitting there in the kitchen. Who are you? Oh, I'm da-da-da-da. Your grandfather is the one who shot my grandfather? I said, yes, and I'm here to front up. Good friend now. In fact, I'll go as far as saying he's whānau now, part of the hapū.
Well, we didn't actually know Te Kauraumaki before we spoke with them. And I don't know how many emails I sent before someone messaged back and said, you know, there's only one person who checks this email maybe once a month. Once a month. But practically, the first thing to do is to check your title. We've got the Methodist, if I say there's a method to the madness. You've got to check your title, and you've got to check the deeds, and you've got to check what's already been agreed through Waitangi Tribunal. Do the work first. The last thing that Te Kauraumaki needed was some good-meaning Pākehā whala trying to say, here's a bunch of floodland, and we don't know anything. I mean, obviously we did more than that, but they got little resources, so everything we're doing is taking up their space. It doesn't matter if it's good, it's well intended. Te Kauraumaki have plenty of work that they need to do, and they punch above their weight already, but getting them to punch down for our little things means less time to focus on what they're doing. So we have a relationship now. So we've done the mahi, we've planted 14,000 trees, which they helped, we involved, and they decided all those things, and now they know that we're serious. But even now, they're still busy with other stuff. So, I give them a buzz, and he'll probably call me back a week later. But chief executives It's definitely the person you want to speak to. Oh, sorry. And the admin person is the most important because they actually control the iwi. That's what they've taught me.
And tikanga is really important. Like, was that you that said about tikanga? The values to use to apply to the kōrero? So as I said, my mother in the 19 whatever, she couldn't read and write English. And so most of those people, they didn't know how to read and write. And they were dependent on others who had been to school and learnt how to read and write. So, yeah.
Kia ora tātou. Another question here. What happens when a property is returned in a state of decay that is potentially gifting a liability to the recipients? See you nodding a lot there, Mato.
Yeah, so the second one we returned was on Te Paitse. Closed 1970s, building's been there, falling down, decaying, went to give it back to the Matikua Repana, and this is absolutely no way. Not in this condition. You do them up, and then you give a fund so that we can continue to look for it, and then we'll consider about receiving the whenua and the buildings back. So we had to do them up first.
I think the other thing to clarify, for me to clarify, is that we did present my nan's eyewitness kōrero to the Waitangi Tribunal, and we are now looking forward to a reconciliation, which means we want to give the Crown an opportunity to come and apologise to us, not only apologise to us, to, you know, for their hara.
I think one thing to remember if you're in an institution or a church is that, particularly a church, that when the church arrived from 1814 onwards, in the first 25, 35 years, they were entirely dependent, actually for much longer, 50 years, maybe longer, entirely dependent on mana whenua manuhiritanga with land, buildings, food, resources, labour and protection. And ironically, the very principles that have been debated over the Treaty of Waitangi, which sound like partnership, participation, equity, options, rangatiratanga, protection, were the very things that were offered to the church communities when they arrived by local Māori themselves. And the mission would have failed in that first 50-year period without those extraordinary acts of hospitality, provision, and labour and building and food, protection, guidance, networking, travelling, guiding. And when you're contemplating as an institution looking at land back to Māori churches or iwi, it's always helpful to tell Pākehā partners on your committee that this is not an act of benevolence or charity or do-goodery or guilt. This is an act of mutual reciprocity as partnership from the very beginning. We would not be here unless they had behaved like this to us. And we are doing, in a very small way, what was given to us.
So with our covenant, so the key thing about a covenant is the responsibility of the land sits with the landowner. So you're not outsourcing responsibility of generations of pollution in the soil and making iwi have to pick it up and it'd be extra work. The responsibility is on the landowner. That's why I think covenant is actually quite a useful thing. You're not putting the work on the iwi, you're holding the relationship, but most importantly, in consultation with Te Karo Amaki, we have to commit to maintaining the native trees that we're replanting until there is canopy cover so that the native trees can be self-sustainable. And until that point, that responsibility sits with us.
I think if you're getting to know them and you're having that whanangatanga side time with them, you'll get a good idea of what resources they have. So case by case basis, right? So they may have all the resources to maintain it, they may have the resources to be turning it around, but they just might not have a footprint. They might have had a decent settlement, but no land. They might have lots of people who don't have jobs and want something to do and be involved with the area, but don't have the funds or the land to do so. So a lot of those answers are just going to come from that whanangatanga side, and then understanding what their needs are. Like, some might be super grateful for having something that they need to be working on. It's a legacy project they can be going through. But just like anything, getting to know what their needs are is going to be paramount for understanding how you're going to navigate those waters.
Kia ora koutou. This question was specifically for, in the instance of the Rangiawhia land back, what government arrangements are in place, governance that is, specifically has the land beneath the church been gifted back, and if so, how is that being held and governed?
It's really interesting, that governance arrangement, because the thing about trusts is that people vote them in, and 9 times out of 10, those people actually didn't live on the land that become trustees. And so they're making decisions because under their tunga, they can make those decisions as trustees. But in actual fact, this is really for us, for Māori. Yeah, to remember, it is right, like someone had said, it's relationship building. If you know that someone else's tupuna belonged on that whenua, surely you would talk to them first, rather than just make a decision because you're a trustee.
Yeah, so has the land beneath the church been gifted back, and if so, how is that held and governed? Because the church, like the whare, is still there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the church is still owned by St. John's Parochial Trust Board. At the moment, they are what would it be, the trust owners of St. Paul's at the moment. But there are discussions now that are happening about what would that look like if we were to return that back to iwi, to Ngāti Apakura. One exciting step forward about that is that I've been invited on to the St. John's Parochial Trust Board as a voice for Māori and our mission out there. So that is a big step forward in the right direction for us.
And this question was also specifically for Te Taputiranga Marae and the Sisters of Compassion. With the debt forgiveness, did the sisters need the money that was to be repaid and have to find other ways for other strategies for your own economic sustainability? Did you want me to?
Like many institutions, we're always fundraising, and to be able to operate our other services like the soup kitchen and housing. But with what we saw, with the benefits of what was going into the whenua, that was far more important to us than any money. It's a wonderful resource for so many people. It's absolutely amazing. So I turned up there in the 1970s, and 30 years later, and it's more now, it is really wonderful what I have seen, the transformation with the native plants and trees is amazing. So somehow there was a sense among the sisters this was the right thing to do. We believe in the providence of St. Joseph, that's part of our tradition. So we knew that we would be provided for without getting all the money back. And we just knew it was the right thing to do.
On that note, if any of you are in Island Bay and Wellington, please come out and see the regrowth out at Manawa Karioi. It's if you Google Manawa Karioi or Tapitiranga Marae or the Sisters of Compassion, Home of Compassion, you'll quite easily find it. Yeah, feel free to come out there, bring your good walking in the mud shoes.
On the 21st of February this month, we're having a maumahara at Rangiawhia. Well, they're calling it Rangiawhia because one of the things we need to negotiate is they got the wrong names in the wrong places. And an example of that is they call one lake Ngā Roto. And everybody knows what Ngā means. Yeah, and so on the signboard it says Ngā Roto Roto. You know, some lake's lake. Doesn't make sense. I would have failed.
One of the things we did want to think through this event was to develop some broad themes and principles, not as things to apply in all places and everywhere, but to draw out the wisdom. I've taken a small list of things that I think I heard emerging out of so much of our kōrero, and I thought maybe to close, to read it and just to open up the floor for all to kind of share on some of those things. The first one is that it's never straightforward, it's always complicated. And I think we saw, a huge diversity of the complications involved in land back. That point that, lots of settler and church wealth was built on the generosity of land gifting, and so this isn't an act of generosity back, but actually a restitution, it's a restoration. It's not a charity case. This idea of covenant, we talked a little bit this morning as well about that. We have all the churches of the fourth article of the treaty represented here, which entails a deep covenant, but equally non-church spaces making covenants that outlast ownership and outlast those transactional kind of relationships. And I think that idea of, distinguishing myth from events, actually uncovering the stories, the preciousness of these that might not be in the places we've got to look. That wasn't particularly succinct, but some of the things that just emerged, and I'd be curious to hear from our speakers, any kind of different additions, wisdoms, insights on those general themes.
Make no assumptions.
I'm going to write that one down.
No assumptions.
Codify it.
I think for Tangata Tiriti, good intentions aren't enough. It has to be relational, it has to be strategic, and it has to be situational. If you do your work to figure out what the history of the land is, you do your work to figure out the costs, and it costs $800,000, I can tell you, there's not many iwi who wouldn't say no to $800,000. Maybe the best way to make change for broader land back is not through your work, but actually to support the work of mana whenua where they want those resources to be spent. It has to be strategic. I think, we talked about the white saviorism, it might be well intended, but it may be a poison chalice. So that's the work that has to be done. I just really think about like Te Kaura Maki's busy fighting all these racists who are saying they're trying to steal land, and then I'm creating more work for them because I'm saying, here, have some land guys. I just think that's that was a really good learning for us, even if it was well intended. We were taking up precious time of the real CEO, that admin person, checking the emails.
if within your institution you have a Māori partner, maybe a church with tikanga Māori and tikanga Pākehā, a learning for us has been, which with hindsight could have been better applied, is to take as long as it takes to talk and kōrero with the Māori partner within your institution before rushing or moving too quickly with prospective iwi partners beyond your hāhi partner. So the covenant you're already in, if you have a Māori partner, is sacred, precious, and needs all the time it takes. Circumstances sometimes make it look like you're being pushed too fast, but try to honour that covenant aspect. I would say lastly, a principle that's very important is the notion of covenant. It's been poo-pooed by one or two politicians, but it's implicit in the 1840 February 6 kōrero. Hone Heke and others used the word covenant for the treaty. And that doesn't just mean a convenient trade sovereignty balance arrangement. It means something sacred, which is for life, forever, for the whole of you, and for all your intentions. And if you're driven by theology, spirituality of covenant, you never give up. You have patience, you ask for patience, you ask for forgiveness, you ask for the capacity to repent. You've got that spirituality capacity, which means you might do much more than some rough and ready expedient deal. You do something that's, we've heard, relational, deep, not perfect, it's never going to be perfect, but abiding with, dare I say, faith, hope and love elements to it.
Any final comments from our wonderful kai kōrero today? Oh, yeah. He wai te tātou. Te aroha. Tēnā koutou katoa. To express once again our profound gratitude for our speakers and for your time this afternoon, please do join us. We're going to have a proper cup of tea, and that is going to happen at the Bishop Monteith Centre, which is on the other side of this cathedral complex. So both these doors, just head directly straight, and at the end you'll see a door on the right. There'll be plenty of people filing in, a bit of food, a bit of tea, and a bit of whakawhanaungatanga. Do also please stay. We have, for those who have signed up for workshops, or even if you haven't, 3 different options. So as you're having your kai together, think about what you might want to join. The first being, how can we advance land back as a wider project, kind of a general discussion about this kaupapa, socially, culturally, things like that. Then how do we advance these specific land back cases? So if you are the type of, that you actually have a property that you're trying to think about, wherever you are at this stage of the process, really workshopping that. Or who can I connect with over advancing land back? This will just be a space of whanaungatanga, getting to know each other, getting that phone number if you need, meeting that person. Have a little think, and if we can kind of go from there depending numbers through each. I'll give a 5-minute warning and tell you where to go. But for now, we've had a really long and wonderful afternoon, and it will be great to have a cup of tea. We'll say karakia mo te kai over in the whare kai. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Tēnā koutou.